Spring training has been common practice for Major League Baseball clubs since the turn of the 20th century. From that time to about the mid-1980s, teams simply used their normal home and away uniforms for spring training games. Right around 1984 and 1985, teams started to experiment with spring training jerseys for their clubs. It's hard to find a lot of evidence of this since we're talking about spring training in the mid-1980s, but from the videos and photos I've found online, that seems to be when it started. At this time, these spring training jerseys also doubled as batting practice jerseys that were worn throughout the regular season. This trend technically continued through the 2011 regular season, even though players rarely wore their batting practice jerseys out to the field at this point and opted for a windbreaker, a sweatshirt, or just a team t-shirt. Through the back half of the 80s and throughout the 1990s, teams wore their own unique spring training / batting practice jerseys. Some were flashier than others, but most of them were made in a mesh style to differentiate themselves from regular season jerseys. Dating back to roughly 2003, a lot of teams ditched the mesh look and decided to have a more cohesive spring training jersey style, but not all the teams went along. Starting right around 2007, MLB decided to have teams look more uniform in their spring training jersey designs and looks. If memory serves, and from what I can find online, I think this was the year like 27 or so teams featured the same style and design for their spring training jerseys, but there were a few holdouts in there. I want to say possibly the Cardinals were one of them, maybe the Tigers, and a few other teams, but I could be wrong. Again, there is not a lot of information about all this stuff online. What I'm going to call the side panel era lasted until 2015. Then starting in 2016, MLB introduced unique jerseys for each team to only be worn during spring training. The front of some of the jerseys looked like the normal alternate jerseys teams wore at the time, but the back was different. For all the jerseys, the back featured white letters and numbers, but within the said numbers and letters, there were sayings and words faintly written all over them. It was mostly just a way to show what year it was and tie the team wearing the jersey to the league that they were in, as in the Cactus League in Arizona or the Grapefruit League in Florida. At this time, the jerseys also featured a patch on the right sleeve that pretty much indicated the same thing. During this era, each year was a tad bit different, but they were generally similar to one another. 2018 was the last year to feature any of the design elements that I mentioned, and 2019 was the swan song of any mention of a spring training patch on the jersey. The short-lived 2020 spring training stripped away any of the unique spring training design elements on the jerseys and were pretty much normal alternate jerseys, and continued on in 2021 with a return to full spring training. Pretty much since Nike took over the uniform manufacturing in 2020, they began peeling away the uniqueness of the spring training jerseys. Starting in 2024 and still currently enforced in 2025, teams can't even feature a jersey at spring training that isn't a part of their normal uniform rotation. So yes, technically the Yankees and Tigers could wear their navy blue alternate jerseys during the regular season if they so desired, since those two jerseys count as one of their alternate jersey options in their uniform rotation. Just a bit more background on the current uniform rotation for teams. Nike enforces a 4+1 rule. Essentially what that means is teams are allotted a home, away, and 2 alternate jerseys, plus a City Connect, totaling in 5 total jerseys a team can wear throughout a season. The 4+1 rule has to be one of the lamest rules ever introduced, and it's just another thing that Nike has done worse compared to Majestic. Spring training has also become quite known for the teams' spring training hats. Now the spring training hats have gone through quite the evolution over the last 30 or so years. From the pictures and info I can find, starting roughly in 1997, teams started to feature a spring training hat. This particular hat could also be used as a batting practice hat, just like the jerseys we talked about earlier. In large part, these hats look like the normal hats teams wore, but it was made out of a mesh material compared to the standard cotton. Just for thoroughness' sake, there were teams in this era who did feature unique looking spring training and batting practice hats like the Expos, A's, and Mariners. This style hat continued on until roughly 2004. Now 2005 seemed to be the year when teams shifted to the flex fit mesh hats. If you were alive during this era, you know what I'm talking about. This type of hat could not look more mid-2000s. This style of hat saw different design elements over its run, but the style of the hat stuck around until 2012. Spring training 2013 was a year of big changes for spring training hats. The hat style was now in the same style as the normal regular game hats, even though it kept the mesh look. At this time, teams really started to lean into their alternate logos and secondary colors for their spring training caps. In 2016, the hats were still the same style, but this was the first year to feature a spring training patch on the side of the hat. The patch showed off what league the team played spring training in, either in Florida for the Grapefruit League or Arizona for the Cactus League. Again, very similar to the jerseys of this era. In 2018, the hats no longer featured the mesh texture. Instead, it was a smooth and more lightweight texture. In 2019, the mesh quickly made a return, even though the mesh style was slightly different compared to the previous years. Regardless, the hat still kept in line with the patch and logo trend that started in 2016. In 2022, a trucker hat style was introduced and it was not beloved by many, but it did survive another year, and 2023 featured them also. In 2024, it was a bit of a return to form. The hats are back to a mesh style material similar to the 2019 hats. Many of the hats continued the trend of showcasing alternate logos and secondary colors colors, and all the hats still have a spring training patch. Here in 2025, the hats are virtually unchanged from 2024, and this seems to be where the spring training hats are going to settle for at least a few years. Well, I think that about covers the entire history of spring training jerseys and hats. Again, my years may be a tad off here or there because there aren't a lot of resources out there when it comes to this topic, so I had to rely on my memory and images like a fine line. With that said, let me know your favorite spring training uniform era down in the comments. And while you're down there, if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel, that'd be greatly appreciated. Until next time guys, everyone have a great day. Thanks for watching.